as well as examine specifically whether or not the four overarching takipu principles or values of kaupapa wānanga being kaitiakitanga, āhurutanga, koha and mauriora correlate to the current practices being employed within the New Zealand Defence Force. Nō reira e hoa mā. Ho mai te piki well, I'll get straight into it, shall I? Let's not waste time. Here we go. So, as we read, takipu inspires adult learning environments, their importance to the students in kaiapu. And as you've heard before, just what Ramari was saying, it's about introducing the conceptual framework into the New Zealand Defence Force, or trying to embed it within the foundation training. So this is what it's going to look like. It's not military at all, is it? So this morning I'll be talking to a number of areas, sort of look at and define what is takipu, adult learning environments and how in this context they apply, and elaborate a little bit more on some of the areas within that. Look at some of the aims throughout this rangaho itself, talk to professional military development, the three areas I'll cover in that. Look at some modified conceptual frameworks, and then discuss some findings, and then also we'll conclude with a little parting quote. So, quite a new terminology for me as well. When I asked this question, what is takipu? Well, we know that it was a framework that was designed and developed by Tana Kohatu, and it came from a position of knowing, So, when we look at what it is, it's a framework that's centred on principled ways of doing and being. Its ultimate goal to utilise is building respectful relationships with people in kaupapa in many contexts. And in this context, it's about looking at and examining the New Zealand Defence Force. Adult learning environments. In this context, so for the purpose of this presentation, I want to look at and describe what this includes, adult learning environments. So it talks about or includes the people of the Defence Force, the professional military development within them, their ethos and values framework, and the learning sources. Now, learning sources in this context is about the forums in which learning takes place, such as a formal environment, non-formal, informal, and you may have heard of it or not, hidden curriculum, which is kind of like the penny dropping here and there. So therefore this research itself seeks to better understand the praxis and implementation of takipu in any adult learning environment, but more specifically from the military learning environment. Before I began drilling into the investigation, so I needed to ask myself some questions about what it is that I'm looking for. And the overarching question, research question for this was about takipu will be efficient and effective tools that cater to learning styles and environments of adult learners. But to answer this question itself, it was about investigating the research and using three enabling questions, if you like, to be able to come up with or assist throughout this rangaho. So looking at what are the current practices being employed by instructors in that learning environment. Can takipu be identified in the praxis? If yes, how? If not, how can the praxis of takipu be implemented? And how will takipu effectively and efficiently cater to the learning styles in that environment? So those are some of the questions leading into the rangaho itself. So when I look at some of the aims itself, the aims of this research was really to introduce the conceptual framework itself, kaupapa wānanga, the four overarching takipu, kaitiakitanga, āhurutanga, And this was introducing it to select providers of trade training and professional military development. And so as the face of training is changing within the Defence Force, you know, they're moving towards education of servicemen and women, there is scope for takipu to be introduced, with the possibility of being embedded into the delivery of foundation training. So by introducing takipu itself, it will only strengthen the warrior ethos. And I will elaborate a little bit more on the ethos and values of this ethos. And you will hear me throughout this presentation, I'll refer to the New Zealand Defence Force as NZDF. You don't know it yet. So when we look at takipu itself, we know that these are unique in Māori. You know, the principles themselves offer, but they offer any person the opportunity to be able to practice that in their personal and professional lives. So it's not just Māori. So moving right along into professional military development, you know, it often confuses the critics out there about what it is. But anyone involved with military education, you know, we intuitively know that this is about more to learning than just a lecturer's notes, script, or diagrams in a textbook. So from this research comes findings, comes clarity, and mapping the way ahead. So the New Zealand Defence Force itself, or NZDF, they internally provide professional military development, like any other organisation. And I'll term it as PMD. So this approach itself, it incorporates practical military experience, mentoring and coaching systems, training both formal and on the job, and education. So while this research itself is focused on individual instructors and adult educators within select military learning environments, a critical dimension to professional development is the contribution of the previous experience, and including training and instruction. But more importantly, the distinction between education and development, or learning, and what is internally, externally imposed and what is actually required. So the Defence Force itself, it is a learning organisation, and it's constantly developing and evolving, and it requires of its people to be well trained. It's not just it is an operationally focused environment, and they need their people to be flexible, to be able to go and undertake a variety of tasks in different realms, if you like, to be able to utilise their technical and intellectual skills. So when we look at what training is in the military, so let's define what it is. So training is primarily the means. It's the means of providing the Defence Force personnel fundamental skills, knowledge, and attitudes to be able to perform as serving members. It's also the most efficient way, if you like, the method of achieving initial confidence, procedures, and set conditions, and standards. Education itself, well, it's less prescriptive, if you like. It's less prescriptive than training. But the impact generally takes longer to emerge. The benefits, however, for the Defence Force are more deeper, more enduring and transferable. So that's the definition of education in the military. Learning the profession itself, well, that's a pretty good place to start, isn't it? Knowing what it's about. And it was the best description, I think, for this research, and it should be the ultimate goal for understanding the delivery of instruction in the military. So it represents the holistic understanding of the storage of expertise based on both formal instruction and learning. Now, you know, learning a profession cannot take place in isolation. You know, it's just like wisdom, similar to wisdom. Understanding the bigger picture of profession requires subject knowledge. So learning a profession itself also involves enculturating the profession's ideology, which Mary is on to. Conceptual framework, 3CI is what we call it. Courage, commitment, comradeship, integrity. So conceptually, to enable the research of instructing in the military, this section provides modified overarching conceptual frameworks. So the professional ideology articulates an organisation's ethos, methods, and reason to exist. And this is a crucial element in military organisations, and it permeates everything that the New Zealand Defence Force particularly within training and education. So considerable effort has been applied into developing this framework. This is an Army framework, and the Air Force and Navy, I know, are similar, developing their own. But there's also the warrior ethos that I alluded to earlier, which is one that is delivered on foundation leadership courses as well. So the Army itself, they've taken bull by the horns and they've sought to reinforce this in their training. So what is it? Ethos. It's about being accountable for your actions. Serve New Zealand loyally, honourably and with pride. Ethos. 24/7, not just while you're in uniform, but also out on the street in public. Everything that you do, you've got to put that sign. The values. Modelling self-awareness and self-control, and also courage. So when I look at this framework here, and I align it to Hakepu, where does that fit? How does it correlate to Hakepu? So courage in ahurutanga, how does ahurutanga apply in this context? Well, it's the overall description of courage. It refers to at all levels of command, strategic, operational, and in peacekeeping as well. It can be identified in areas such as physical training, being on range, weapons range, or conducting any professional military tasks. Commitment, the obligation of responsibility, obligation of the Defence Force personnel towards the government, New Zealand, and also the Defence Force itself. So when I align Modi Order to that, in this context, it's about the energy and motivation, that drives the servicemen and women who want to contribute on the global stage. And they have been, we've seen them in operations. But it's about working and continually striving to work to their fullest potential. And individually and collectively questioning themselves, what am I here for? How will my actions contribute to the Modi Order of these people, of this place, the project? And are we aware, or are they aware of their own states of motive, and how can they take care of themselves? Comradeship, an attribute that develops out of trust, learning and working together. So through comradeship, they continue to support and encourage, their fellow colleagues, NZDF colleagues. Kaitiakitanga to me aligns very well with this. Why? By virtue of their roles and responsibilities, commanders at all levels are considered kaitiaki. They have a responsibility to the men and women under their direct command, their peers and their superiors. Now, their role is to embrace, encourage whanaungatanga, comradeship, and to develop respectful relationships built on trust. Integrity, ensuring they remain open, honest, and trustworthy in all that they do, how they conduct themselves, with sincerity, reliability, unselfishness, and consistency. Koha, making contributions of consequence. Peacekeeping and operations, the act of koha, strongly connected to ahurutanga and kaitiakitanga. At all levels, servicemen and women operate in adverse conditions, and they constantly ask of themselves, how can I best koha to this situation? How can I make a contribution? So an ongoing process of mine has been an analysis of development, design, implementation, and evaluation of a personal and professional conceptual framework. This here is a grasshopper, and this is taken from my hapu, Ngāti Arohawa, Ngā Tātua, and I deemed it relevant in this context, the support to draw on, to be able to apply this in my personal and professional life. So when I look at what can these represent, or what can I look at that's going to represent and strengthen my practice of the law. So I thought about practice. What does that involve? How do I practice? So since my transition from uniform into civilian life, So these are the three things that I've looked at, that I kind of am looking at applying continually to develop. Humanistic, it's about the learner, the person, something that I was never used to. Manaakitanga, taking care of them, how am I helping them along? And maintaining that sense of whanaungatanga information, developing them. Theories, of course, we've all heard them. Supported by Māori and non-Māori, no bias there. Heard it right along. Reflection. Reason why I put it here, we do a lot of that. Thinking, pondering. It's quite sore for some, maybe. I will elaborate a little bit more on my own reflective framework as well. And of course, takipu, the cooking, the guts of what is always sort of reflecting on what is it, how do they apply, personal, professional. Right, so yay, ATA, innovative tool for reflection. Yay, yeah. So ATA is the applied principle takipu. It's a Māori framework based on behavioural and ethical strategies employed in relationships. So this Indigenous framework derives from some of the fundamental thinking developed in the bicultural social work program within Te Wānanga. Why ATA, you're asking? Well, when I first heard of this term, and a notion that was expanded on by Marjorie Richmond, who had taken it from, who decided that she would develop it from Kohata Whānau. Now, Marge delivered a presentation in Hawaii on ATA, and I just want to share a little story of hers, a narrative of why ATA. So Marge first heard of this term, so did I, from whānau hui, when the nana used to pull whānau hui to deal with any tension, any dodo, and she would use the words ata oro, ata haere. And so that kind of triggered something for me. And what's particularly interesting about this is that it requires us to listen to me, to listen with effective deliberation, patience, giving space to communicate to us. Yes. Anyway, so here's a quote that I've taken from Martin's work. So basically this is something that you and Anne said, so it wasn't about you get up and do this. It's an invitation to be able to exchange your view, your opinions, be safe within that environment, to be able to pull it all. So I've chosen three that challenge me to be able to continue down this pathway. Ata whakarongo. Right, yes. Ata kōrero. Ata whakaaro. And as I said, challenge they are. But it's a good challenge because it's about reminding me of my practice. So let me ask you this, and let's just use ata whakarongo for example. Do we practice ata whakarongo in our lives? Do I practice it in my workplace, in my classroom? Have I practiced ata whakarongo at this conference? So that's just a question to ponder on throughout the day as well. So that is the talk reflection that I am challenging myself, if you like, to incorporate and continue to develop. So, the research itself, number of findings, of course. So throughout this, I will be sharing some of the findings to you. I have gained ethical approval in the written review, so I will be sharing those with you. So just a little bit of the background, the participants themselves, some interesting characteristics. 6 females, 4 males, 10 in total, 150 years collective service, mixed ethnicities, and one of the things that came out of this is that actually the women fulfil the education roles at the moment in their select providers of trade training and professional development, which is a good thing. Yes. Qualifications, well, okay, so 80% of them hold a tertiary certificate, 10% higher. Still working on that. Start encouraging them to get in and start, forging a way forward for themselves. So these are some of the things that came out of the analysis of this Running research. Roles and attributes. Something that we always think about and strive to do within the Defence Force itself. Being a good instructor is about listening, questioning, and being responsive. Having the ability to adapt to any situation, any learning environment, whatever that may be. Good instructors do not take themselves seriously. Remember that humour should be appropriate. Yeah. Role itself, well, their role is to encourage and motivate personnel, take a positive manner. Enabling learning that is effective and of high standard. Attributes. Yeah, it takes a lot to develop effective training that will meet the needs of both the organisation and the learners. So the New Zealand Defence Force instructor is able to use their leadership and training skills to provide both formal and informal instruction. Formal learning, so this is it's a learning source if you like, a theme that kind of fell out of this process. Formal learning is considered the traditional source of learning, like this, declarative knowledge. And interestingly enough, some of the participants talked about that it was probably the most reported that learning in this environment was where they learned about their specific trade values. So I found quite interesting. Yeah, ample room for non-formal learning represents all the learning generated from activities influenced by the institute, not the learner, directed by syllabus, and also, but it does include the intended and unintended activities resulting from activities and cultural artifacts within that curriculum. Informal learning captures a number of experiences controlled by the learner. The significant strength of informal learning, though, is the opportunity to learn from each other. So, as instructors, to be able to deliver a prescribed set of training is the ability to learn from each other. And it's not always encouraged and initiated in this environment from the instructor, but various suggestions were also offered on how the situation could be improved and how sort of ranges of presentations could be carried out. So this is an excerpt from a participant. So the first speech, which is quite interesting, should be on yourself, not personal, but professional background. So you know how and who to go to for help. Students should write a paper on themselves to raise their own self-awareness and then present. Yeah. The hidden curriculum, some of you may or may not have heard of this. It refers to default learning. Oh, light bulb moments sort of thing. The generation of curriculum has recorded history since the time of Plato. And it's a term, singular definition that has been elaborated on by Jackson. So it's basically about what ways can the students learn to access denial and interruption, if you like, of their personal desires and wishes. It does, however, include non-formal learning resulting from different activities within the institution. So it's quite broad. But in education, the hidden curriculum refers to the way in which cultural values and attitudes such as obedience to authority, punctuality, and delayed gratification are transmitted through the methods of instruction. Formation of the organisation. So the learning is acquired from hidden curriculum. If the military or majority of the military professional values are learned through the hidden curriculum, instructors must be cognizant of what they're teaching. Anyway, so this is the past report. At the deepest level of your being, you have to be willing to see your only thing separating you from the success that you earnestly desire is the degree to which you want it. How badly do you want it? Eh? Right. Fully up your focus. Questions? Any questions? Where will you take it from now? Will you present it to? The intention is to do that. So I do work in a providing training to all sorts of levels, and participants are also SLEP providers. But the intention is to also deliver it to those that can influence the change, or and I'm talking about within the education environment of the Defence Force, the New Zealand Defence College next door, to be able to make a difference in terms of who they're delivering to. It's not just to Army, but the three services. Just saying to them, hey, this does exist. It's not about taking over the values, the personal values, or the organisation values, but it's about these here, although they're new to you, you may have never heard of the Māori terms, to not be afraid of them, but to use them to enhance and strengthen what you already know.
Hannah, you talked about, and you did very well, where you tied up NZDF, ethos and educational framework. And when you were speaking, you tied it up with the takipu. So you talked about commitment, obligation and responsibility on the Defence Force side, and then you put kaitiakitanga on the takipu. Now you did that really well. I'm asking now is at the end of your research, at the end of your rangahai and your findings, have you come to a conclusion that perhaps New Zealand Defence Force is actually practicing takipu,
Absolutely.
and probably unconsciously don't
Absolutely.
recognise
It is inherent in what they do, although we have different terminology.
Yeah.
It is there. It is visible.
So if that's the case, what's your next step?
It's about saying that, within the Māori, takipu itself goes a little bit deeper than just, lip service to words, if you like. It's about getting into the deeper inner being of the younger generation that are coming through, who are now able to influence the new recruits, new trade trainees, and that sort of thing. So they're more open to change because they haven't been they're quite impressionable, aren't they, at that young age. So be able to make the change there on a foundation course, foundation instructors, that is a good start for them. So as they come through.
What change are you envisaging if we can now acknowledge that the Defence Force are already actually adhering to or attending to what we're calling takipu? What change do you envisage going forward?
For me, like I said, it's about getting into the individual itself. It's not about the organisation. If I can make that difference to just individuals who are responsible for the delivery of training, it's not just about they can go out into the whānau, into the community, and start living that and practicing that. Like I said, we do pay lip service to a lot of the ethos and values, but it's about continually communicating that and keeping them aware, making them aware that they do exist and not to be afraid of them.
It's like the 3CI and warrior ethos walking side by side.
Absolutely. Like I said, it's not about counteracting or cancelling one out. It's about working together. They're both interwoven. So it's about strengthening that one that already exists in the organisation.
And I think you raised really well the concept of universal values, although we don't have these specific names. So, and I can hear in the explanation that that's the overriding thing with such a big body like NZD. My question before was just a simple one. Has the NZD
One of the things that you talked about in the education side of it was attitude.
Yes.
And so I just wanted to let you guys know that military or service is the only place where attitude is taught.
Yes.
In most places you'll
You
hear,
will react to this,
Yeah.
and this is how you
Yeah.
will.
in most places you get attitudes can't be taught, but this is the only place in the military where it can. So, kia ora. That's why where we are, that's why we're the way we It was there, she just didn't realise it was.
It's really interesting when we first all came together, a couple of you commented on the fact that you could notice which of us in our class were ex-services. And it's because of their attitude thing, which becomes an innate part of who you are for the rest of your life. Amen. So you've just articulated some of that in your kōrero, and I like the way that you managed to tie the warrior ethos in with the tapuku. I was interested to see how you do that. Lovely concept of family. Well done. You're welcome.
I did realise you were going to stand, so I just wanted to say a couple of things. I just wanted to say that Anna has been so dedicated to her studies here over the last couple of years. She's really enjoyed being part of Te Reo Aotearoa, mostly because this place is just a place where we get to be ourselves. And when I say ourselves, oh look, I'm using a word, maybe get biased to it. But when I say ourselves, I mean to be Māori in this environment. Anna has, this is the first time I've seen her presentation. She didn't do her presentation to me prior to this. I had no idea what was in it. And so this week I've been growling her. I said, you know, this is a whānau thing, Anna. This isn't just about you. Why haven't we seen any of your mahi yet? You know? So I've been growling her this week, and so she's been feeling that a little bit. But in saying that, she's absolutely independent and able to do whatever she needs to do away from, you know, us, and show that she also is a person of her own. And I can see that today, and a little bit of my own work in there. But just keeping it really short, I just wanted to say I think her class is aware that her mother was a primary school teacher and spent many, many years teaching, and then in her last 10 years or so was a hokangareo teacher, kayako, and her father was a truck driver. So she holds a little bit of both of them. And because both her parents are gone now, they've gone over just before she started studying here in Wānanga, and I know that they will just be so proud of what she's achieved here at Wānanga, that she may not have achieved in another tertiary organisation. And if they could have made it, because she'll be graduating. So her graduation, that would have been a huge thing for her family to be able to go and watch. And so congratulations, that was a really awesome presentation. Really fitting of the year 3 Tauira, and I've marked me. And it was really great. All your ranaho was coming out, oh my goodness, you just don't sit into the picture. Next time, you can do it. She doesn't want to wear it.
And what you've delivered here for me is a continuation of what I observed when I came to your observation. Just to interrupt, sorry, I'd just like to acknowledge and introduce you to Lepika. Kaipoki's trying to sit in the back and hide away. Lepika's our regional academic manager, and Lepika, we really appreciate the time that you have taken of your own time to come down and support us. Lepika, I don't know if you know, she just pops up everywhere, and I can be sitting there thinking, oh man, I wish I had some support, and suddenly Lepika's just there. She pops up for us everywhere. Lepika, we really
know you're here for a short time because you're going to go to the tangi that I would really like to be with, but I know I can send my love with you and you will take that to the tangi and I'll stay here. But thank you for the kia ora.
Tēnā koe Rewhika. No mai, hara mai. I'm sure our next lot of presenters are going, oh no.
She'll be gone by then, it's all right. Kara.
But thank you, Anna. Thank you, Anna. That was an extremely effective and awe-inspiring presentation full of information on Ngā Takipu, introducing the conceptual framework. I loved your conceptual framework of the grasshopper. I think it was just fantastic. And how it all fits in with the New Zealand Defence Force. Wasn't that fantastic? Let's hear it. Okay, so it's that time again. We're going to take a few minutes, but rather than have another kai, how about we go top up the kai? And we'll let our next speaker get ready.
After lunch.
Oh, is it okay?
Kara
Hello.
has next. What was
After
the time?
lunch.
Kara has Manuhiri travelling up from Wellington, so even
Oh,
though
well,
we're
let's
ahead
take
of
a break.
time. Yeah. What's the break?
So it's only 11:30 now, people, and you know a break's all right.
Yeah.
A break is all right. So
Yes.
we've got a big break. If Kara's got whānau travelling up, we're not going to bring his forward.
No.
So you've got a big break, whānau.
So we have the option of either somebody who wants to present now who doesn't have Manuhiri coming, or breaking. I'm going to take that back off.